National parks are a symbol of the wild beauty and power of nature, places where man can touch the pristine world. But behind this breathtaking picture are stories that send shivers down your spine. Among the majestic mountains, dense forests, and mysterious canyons, events happen that cannot be explained. Today we will tell you about the most mysterious disappearances of park rangers, seasoned professionals who knew the area like the back of their hand. They would leave on patrol but never return. What could have happened? An accident? A wild animal attack? Or something else? Something beyond our comprehension? Yosemite National Park, located in California, is famous for its majestic granite cliffs, waterfalls, and dense forests. This natural paradise attracts millions of visitors each year, but behind its beauty lie stories sometimes too dark to be spoken aloud. One such is the disappearance of Ranger Joseph "Joe" Michelson during a night patrol in November 1995. Joe, a 34-year veteran of the National Park Service, was known for his dedication and intimate knowledge of the local ecosystem. Originally from the small town of Mariposa, he had dreamed of working in Yosemite since he was a child. Colleagues described him as a calm and poised man for whom nature was not just a place to work, but a part of life. On November 2, 1995, Joe went on night duty with two other rangers, Paul Warren and Sarah Green. Their job was to patrol along the Mist Trail, a popular hiking trail, to make sure there were no trespasses and to check the condition of the trails after the recent fall rains. The route started in the Happy Isles area and climbed up to the famous Vernal and Nevada Falls. Around 9 p.m., the group was near the Merced River Bridge when a thick fog suddenly lifted. This was strange, for the weather up to that point had been clear. The fog seemed unnaturally dense, like a wall absorbing the light of the streetlights. The temperature plummeted and the rangers decided to stop moving so they wouldn't lose each other. At about 21:30, a dim light began to appear from the depths of the fog ahead. It was white and flickering a little, like the flames of a campfire, but too steady and still. Joe speculated that it might be a group of hikers who had broken the rules by camping in the wrong place. He decided to go check out the source of the light, asking Paul and Sarah to stay put. Joe was armed with a flashlight and a walkie-talkie, which he kept on to keep in touch with his colleagues. A few minutes after Joe disappeared into the fog, communication with him began to break down. Paul and Sarah could hear his calm voice reporting that he was approaching the light. Suddenly, however, the signal became weaker, and then there was a strange noise, a combination of crackling, interference, and a quiet humming. Occasionally, you could make out individual words in the interference, but they seemed meaningless. Paul tried to contact Joe, but there was no response. After a few minutes, the radio went completely silent. Sarah began to panic, but Paul insisted that they stay where they were. They decided to wait 15 minutes before following him. Soon their decision was in vain. Joe had not returned, and the light in the fog had disappeared. By midnight, Paul and Sarah called for reinforcements. By 2 a.m., additional rangers arrived in the area, and the search began. However, thick fog remained, making visibility and orientation difficult. The search party began combing the area, but found no sign of Joe or the light source. The next morning, the fog cleared, revealing a wet and slippery trail strewn with foliage. By the bridge over the Merced River, searchers found Joe's radio. It was lying on a rock as if it had been carefully placed. When they turned it on, they heard faint interference and disjointed sounds resembling a human voice. However, it was impossible to decipher the words. During the week while the search continued, testimonies began to come in from hikers who claimed to have seen something strange at night on the trails. One hiker reported seeing strange lights in the sky. Rangers involved in the search also noted unusual phenomena. Some spoke of sudden temperature changes and the feeling of being watched. One searcher reported that his compass began showing the wrong direction as he approached a bridge over the river. After 2 weeks of fruitless searching, the official investigation was concluded. The report indicated that Joe Michelson probably died by falling off the cliff or into the river. However, the absence of a body or obvious traces of this version left many puzzled. Joe's family refused to accept such a version. They insisted that he was too experienced to have simply gotten lost or made a mistake. Joe's wife, Catherine, filed a request for a reinvestigation, but her request was denied. Rocky Mountains National Park in Colorado is a place where nature is impressive in its scope and pristine wildness. Hundreds of miles of trails like the Bear Lake Trailhead, Emerald Lake Trail, and Flat Top Mountain Trail beckon hikers with their beauty, but can be a death trap for those who aren't adequately prepared. Jonathan Hartman, an experienced ranger with 20 years of experience, knew these lands better than most. He was trusted by his superiors and co-workers, knowing him as a professional capable of handling any challenge. Hartman was not only a conservationist, but also a guide who often warned hikers of the dangers of the high mountain terrain, such as sudden snowstorms or wild animals. On October 24, 2003, Jonathan was assigned to check sections of Forest Canyon Pass and Odessa Lake, where reports of stranded hikers had been received. These areas are known for their difficulty: steep climbs, rocky sections, and dense forests. Hartman left Bear Lake Trailhead around 7 a.m., radioing that he expected to finish the detour by evening. However, Jonathan had not returned by the appointed time. When attempts to contact him by radio were unsuccessful, his co-workers became concerned. The next day, a group of rangers and volunteers began combing the area. The first thing they found were tracks on the Flat Top Mountain Trail that led toward the Fern Lake Trailhead. The trails looked fresh, but disappeared at the fork leading to Odessa Lake. This location was at an elevation of about 3,000 feet, in an area where dense forest transitions to alpine meadows. Further on, the search party came across something strange. On the side of the trail, near Lake Helene, Jonathan's hat, which had always been part of his uniform, was found. There were no other signs of the ranger's presence nearby. Several surveillance cameras mounted at trail intersections in the park recorded Jonathan at 9:15 in the morning. He was moving confidently, alone, but one of the recordings clearly showed something odd. At a distance of about 20 meters behind him, a shadow was moving. It wasn't human, but it wasn't an animal either. The blurred silhouette moved unnaturally smoothly, as if sliding on the ground. Experts analyzed the recording for a long time but could not determine exactly what it was. On the third day of the search near Notchtop Mountain, about 5 kilometers from the last known location, the group found Hartman's abandoned backpack. Inside were his notes and a route map, but the backpack looked strange. All the clasps were open, as if someone had deliberately checked its contents. Not far from the backpack was found his radio transmitter. It was turned off, which was highly unusual given that rangers are required to leave their radios on. There were deep scratches on the body of the device that looked like claw marks, but it didn't look like a bear or mountain lion attack. When a week of searching yielded no new clues, the local press and residents began to build their theories. Some argued that Jonathan could have been kidnapped by a man or even victimized by poachers. Others speculated that it was a wild animal attack, despite the lack of blood or signs of a struggle. The most discussed version concerned mysticism. A camera with an indistinct silhouette was the occasion for rumors that Hartman had encountered something inexplicable. Legends about mountain spirits and mysterious creatures have long been circulating among tourists and locals. The official investigation concluded that Jonathan could have gotten lost in the sudden deterioration of the weather, although this version remained controversial. His body was never found. A few years later, the park updated its security system, adding more cameras and sensors to prevent similar incidents. Glacier National Park in Montana has long been known for its rugged wilderness and stunning scenery. Among those who patrol its trails every day, monitoring the safety of hikers and the health of the ecosystem, rangers are especially respected. However, even the most experienced of them are not immune to the unexpected in this uncharted land. In the summer of 2004, an incident occurred that still remains a mystery. On July 13th, 2 rangers, Michael Ransom and Danny Walsh, went on patrol on one of the park's most remote trails, the Ptarmigan Tunnel Trail. Their job was to check the condition of the trail after recent rainstorms and see if reports of bear tracks spotted by hikers posed a risk. The trail, which leads to the famous tunnel cut into the rock at an elevation of over 2,000 feet, is known for its challenging terrain, steep cliffs, and swirling winds. Michael Ransom, a 37-year veteran of the service, was a man you could count on in any situation. Calm, methodical, he knew the park like the back of his hand. His partner, 29-year-old Danny Walsh, was new to Glacier but quickly proved himself to be an energetic and attentive employee. Together, they made an excellent team. The patrol began in the morning when the mountains were shrouded in thick fog. The trail, usually busy in the summer, was empty on this day. The tourist season was a few weeks away, and only rare travelers ventured here at this time of year. This was another factor that brought peace of mind. The risk of encountering tourists or needing a rescue operation was minimal. When the rangers reached Iceberg Lake Junction, they noticed fresh grizzly bear tracks leading toward the forest. The tracks were deep, left recently. Michael offered to be on the lookout, but did not consider the situation threatening. Bears were a regular occurrence in the area, and their presence was not unusual. As they moved further toward Ptarmigan Falls Point, they noticed that the fog had begun to clear, but with it came a strange sense of silence. Usually the place was enlivened by the sounds of water, birds singing, and the wind walking through the valley. This day it was different. Even the waterfall seemed to sound muffler than usual. Michael noted that the birds in the area were silent for some reason and suggested they move on to finish the patrol soon. As they began their ascent toward the tunnel, the bear tracks caught their attention again. This time they were closer to the trail. Michael, who had studied the tracks for years, stopped and crouched down to examine them closer. The paw prints led toward the cliff, where the trail became especially narrow. Danny continued up the trail, expecting his partner to catch up with him soon. When he had gone a few meters, however, Michael suddenly disappeared from sight. Danny stopped and called out to him on his radio, but there was no response. Concerned, Danny walked back to the spot where he had last seen Michael. All he found were his boot tracks leading to the very edge of the cliff. The tracks broke off suddenly, as if Michael had simply disappeared. There were no rocks tumbling down, no signs of a struggle, no broken branches nearby. It was as if he had simply vanished. Near the cliff, Danny spotted Michael's walkie-talkie. The device was lying on the ground as if it had been carefully placed. When he tried to turn it on, there was a crackle of static and then an indistinct voice saying something he couldn't make out. Frightened, Danny took a few steps back and tried to call for backup, but the signal was gone. Danny returned to the start of the trail and reported the incident. Within hours, the rescue operation was underway. The next day, additional forces arrived at the park. A team of rangers, rescue workers, and volunteers began to scour the area. Helicopters scanned the cliff, hoping to find at least a hint that Michael might have fallen down. However, the bottom of the canyon was completely empty. There were no clothes, no body, and no other evidence that Michael had fallen. The dogs engaged in the search followed his tracks all the way to the cliff, but could take the scent no farther. They circled in one place as if something was confusing them. For a week, rescuers surveyed every meter of the trail and surrounding areas. Archival maps and records were brought up to make sure Michael couldn't have accidentally strayed onto some old, abandoned trail, but not the slightest hint of his whereabouts could be found. The cliff became the terminus, and no one could explain what happened next. After 2 weeks, the search was called off. Michael Ransom was officially reported missing. For many of his colleagues, it was a huge blow. He was considered one of the best rangers in the park, and his disappearance seemed impossible. Some speculated that Michael may have fallen down, but his body was somehow dragged under rocks or into a crevasse. However, the absence of any trace of a fall made this theory doubtful. Others hypothesized a wild animal attack, but there were no signs of a struggle either. Zion National Park, located in Utah, is known for its Grand Canyons, steep cliffs, and winding trails. This place attracts millions of tourists every year looking for unity with nature. However, in April 1999, One of the most mysterious stories associated with the park sparked a wave of questions and rumors that have not subsided to this day. Edward Grayson, a 37-year-old ranger, was a seasoned employee with 10 years of service to the park. During his years of service, he had become not only an expert in safety and rescue operations, but also a man to whom colleagues turned for advice. Good-natured and poised, he was known for his love of nature and professional approach to his work. His disappearance came as a shock to all who knew him. On April 8, 1999, Edward went out on his morning patrol. His route took him through one of the most visited areas of the park, the Observation Point Trail, leading to one of the most scenic lookouts overlooking the canyon. The ranger's job was to check the condition of the trail after a recent rockfall and confirm safety for hikers. Making contact at 8:15 in the morning, Edward reported that he had reached the midpoint of the trail and had not noticed any major damage. He planned to reach the trail's terminus, conduct an inspection, and return by noon. Colleagues noted that his voice sounded upbeat and there were no alarms. However, after this message, communication with Edward was cut off. Attempts to reach him by radio were unsuccessful. At first, his colleagues did not think much of it, assuming that he might have been in an area with a bad signal. But when he did not return by the appointed time, the alarm began. At about 12:30, a group of hikers returning from Observation Point reported a strange sighting to park staff. They saw a man dressed in a ranger's uniform, standing on the edge of a cliff at the end of the trail. According to eyewitnesses, he seemed immersed in his thoughts, standing motionless, looking down. When one of the hikers decided to call out to him, the man turned around for a moment and then, as if dissolving, disappeared from sight. When asked if it could have been Edward, the campers nodded confidently, describing his height, build, and uniform. At this point, however, their testimony was perceived as a fluke or a perceptual error. By the evening of the same day, a search operation was organized. A group of rangers and volunteers began to scour the trail from beginning to end. First of all, they checked the place where hikers said they had seen a man on the edge of the cliff. However, no trace of Edward was found there. The stone ledges were untouched, and there were no signs of a fall or cave-in. There was dense vegetation below the cliff, and a search party armed with climbing gear descended to check the area. They soon found an Iron Ranger's badge belonging to Edward. There were no other signs. The next day, the rescue team expanded the search area. Helicopters, drones, and sniffer dogs were used. But despite their efforts, Edward's body was never found. A few days after the disappearance, another strange sighting was reported. Hikers climbing the Angel's Landing Trail claimed to have seen a man resembling a ranger in a remote part of the gorge. However, when they tried to get closer, he disappeared from their sight. Park officials were suspicious, believing it could have been an ordinary hiker who happened to catch sight of the man. But the number of similar reports increased. People told of a man resembling the missing ranger. At this time, the researchers studied data from surveillance cameras installed on the trail. The footage from one of the cameras, located at a bend in the trail, captured Edward. However, he later moves out of the camera's shooting radius and walks in an unknown direction. After several weeks of intense searching, the official investigation was closed. The report stated that the probable cause of the disappearance could have been an abduction or an incident related to extreme terrain. However, the absence of a body, signs of a struggle, or other evidence left many questions unanswered. Edward's relatives refused to accept the official version. They pointed out that he was too experienced and cautious to fall into a trap or make a mistake. National parks will always be places of amazing beauty and undiscovered mysteries. Stories of park ranger disappearances make us wonder how little we know about wildlife and its hidden dangers. What happens to those who go out on patrol and never return? Perhaps the answers remain hidden behind a dense veil of forests, mists, and mountains. Or maybe these disappearances are part of something bigger that we can't yet explain. If you're caught up in these stories, be sure to give us a like to support our channel. Write in the comments what you think about these disappearances, normal natural phenomena, accidents, or something more mysterious. And if you have heard of other similar cases, share your stories. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new investigations and stories about natural mysteries. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.